Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome. So, imagine a world where every message we craft inspires action. It shifts mindset and transforms communities. What if a simple phrase or some powerful image or a well-structured story could change the way people think about health, about human rights, in some cases about climate change? In civil society, communication is not just about delivering information. It's about influencing behavior, fostering trust, and mobilizing communities for change. Yet, many well-intentioned messages fall flat, not because they are not important, but because the message isn't well crafted or effectively crafted. So, as civil society leaders, as sector leaders, it is key to understand that we don't just speak, we actually influence. Whether we are addressing aspects to do with TB awareness, gender-based violence, climate change, or access to justice, our message must do more than just inform. But we must inspire, engage, and drive action. Because it is a known fact that it's not so much about knowledge, but the ability of the message to inspire someone to move from what they do call their intentions to actually acting on it. So today, I'm going to be talking about 10 key components of effective social behavior change communication. 10 key components of effective social behavior change communication. It's what I'm going to be unpacking today, where we're going to be exploring how to make your communication more compelling, relatable, and action-driven. We want to do action-packed communication, from understanding your audience to using culturally relevant storytelling. These are principles that will actually elevate the manner in which you craft your message to ensure that it drives change in the communities that we serve. So, sit back and relax. I'm going to be taking you through those particular components. Now, component number one, it's more about identification of the gap or the pain point. Now, in some cases, we'll call it the problem statement. You would know that civil society sectors, they're busy undertaking multiple studies. They're busy coming up with lots of research activities in the space of TB, in the space of climate change, and in various other topics. But one of the key things that they are doing in this process is identification of the gap or of the pain point that people are going through. So basically here it talks about you clearly define the issue or the barriers that need to be addressed. So you must be very clear in your mind in terms of what are some of these pain points, what are some of these barriers that people are actually facing, why it matters. Particularly from a point of saying that identifying pain points, it helps in creating relevance of the message. So whatever message that we are crafting, be it is towards the World TB Day, World AIDS Day, or there are all these events with Valentine's Day or any of these public holidays, we need to make it a point that the message that we are coming up with, particularly from a health perspective, from a community perspective, there is something that it seeks to address. There is a specific gap or a specific pain point that it seeks to address. For example, it could be something to do with many men delay TB treatment because they don't recognize any symptoms. So that could potentially be a gap that we're having in the market, be a gap that we're having in the community, be a gap that we're having in the households, be a gap that I'm having at a personal level, or that could be potentially be a pain point that I've seen from my partner. And all of those aspects are key elements that when we're crafting our message, we need to center our work around. We need to begin to think, what are some of those particular pain points that we are having in the communities that we're serving? And then, of course, we do have the second component. So the second component, it could be the target group or the target audience. In some cases, we would call it audience segmentation, where we begin to talk about who is this message is for. So who is actually our target audience when we're having this particular message? For example, right now, the message is largely targeted at civil society leaders. It's largely targeted at community-based organizations that are actually crafting social behavior change communication messaging. Is targeted at university students. It's targeted at recent graduates. It's targeted at seasoned people in the social behavior change communication space. Because we want to try and target them with this messaging and assist them to drive change at a localized level. So we need to think about who is the target audience when we are doing social behavior change communication. We begin to segment these people maybe by demographics, or by looking at certain behaviors, or by some of the social cultural aspects. So if we're in a position to come up with those kinds of segments, we are likely to drive change. If we are in a position to come up with a much more targeted messaging, we're likely to drive change in the communities. And then typical example could be young men aged 18 to 35 in urban areas who are at risk of TB, or in the mining communities, men aged 40 to 54 who are in the mining communities, or ex-mine workers who are in this particular age group, or men around this particular mine in the Eastern Cape, in a predominantly rural area and cultural area, or preservative or conservative area. So we need to have all of those things in mind to say we are going to be going to the Northern Cape, and this is our target audience. These are the kinds of people that we'll be targeting. Because we cannot just have 2 or 3 messages that are targeting everyone in the communities. We need to be coming up with tailored messages for different communities. And that is very, very key. And then, of course, we've got the third component. Now, the third component talks about exactly what is the key message that we want to drive. What is the core of this particular message that we want to drive? What is the key takeaway that we want to get out of this? And these key messages, they must be very clear, concise, and action-oriented. So it is very key that as we craft our messages, as we come up with the messages that we want to take into the communities, we come up with something that is so clear and concise. But not only that, we want to have a call to action on that particular message. We want to have some drive to say, this is the action that needs to be taken. And this must align with the audience values and beliefs. So there is an aspect to do with the audience, with the target group that we spoke about. To say, in line with those particular target groups, let's begin to think, what are some of the best ways of coming up with concise, clear, and action-oriented messaging? Messaging that when they get it, they would have a call to action. This is what they need to be doing thereafter. This is their takeaway or the take-home message. So those are some of the key things when it comes to crafting of messaging. And then, like I said, I've got 10 of these. Then the other one that I would want to emphasize, which is component number 4, it's actually a call to action. So a call to action, look at it as a behavioral prompt. So it specifies what action that audience should take. Remember, we've spoken about the target audience. Now you've zeroed in on the fact that you are targeting men in the in the catchment area of a specific mine that are ex-mine workers, or you're targeting men in the catchment area of a specific mine that are current mine workers, because those would be two different groupings of people that might need two different messaging. So we need to have a behavioral prompt, which is a call to action. So it actually specifies what action the audience should take. And why this matters so much. This must be a clear direction that leads to maybe higher rates, higher response rates, or higher chances of them getting up and going for screening. For example, you could say visit to your clinic for a free TB screening. Call 011 TB Help for more information. So at the end, there is actually a call to action to say that do this. Go and visit your facility, or go and call this particular number, or here is someone to talk to. So those are key components, having a call to action, because some of the messaging you find that it's very good message. It hits the nail on the head. It drives the emotions. It appeals, but actually it doesn't drive a person to a specific call to action to say, what do they do? It just leaves them there in suspense without giving them that call to action. And then the other component, which is component number 5, it's around the emotional appeal. So your messages must have that emotional appeal. They must have that persuasive strategy in them. They must be persuasive by nature. So in some cases, we need to use some emotive language, use some emotions. Like I said, we need to come up with different methodologies, different ways through which we craft our messages. In some cases, we can use fear. In some cases, we can use hope. In some cases, we can use things like agency. Or in some cases, it could be an issue of social belonging. So all of these, they've got an emotional appeal attached to them. And these are also targeted at driving behavior change. So, but then, why is it so important? It's because people respond more strongly to emotionally charged messages. So you'll find that what drives some of the changes that are happening in the communities, some of the changes that are happening in the households, some of the decisions that need to be done at a household level, it could be centering around fear, centering around hope. Right? So you would find that in some cases you would say, your family needs you. Don't let TB take you away from them. So there is some charge, some emotional charge that is associated with that. And that could appeal to the men out there. It would appeal to the mothers out there, because they know that their kids need them, their children needs them. And some of these are mine workers, they are farm workers, and then they are the breadwinners, they are the heads of the household, and they know their families need them. And then they are likely to take the necessary steps. So I've spoken about 5 components. I'm not going to be jumping to the 6th one, which is going to be credibility and trust. Now, this centers around the source of the message. Are you a trusted source of this kind of messaging? So messaging should come from trusted sources. So this normally comes from, public health professionals. That is why I'm saying, as civil society organizations, as people in the civil society space, as people that are working in the communities, we're likely to be a trusted source because we've got that credibility in our communities, in our sectors, in our key population groups, in the areas that we work in. So it is key for us to maintain that credibility so that we continue disseminating the information and we become a credible source or a trusted source in the communities. So it is key for us to ride on the fact that we are a trusted source of information in the communities. The sex work sector, targeting sex workers in the communities. The ones that are in the human rights space, they will target those that are needing access to justice. The PUD, a subsector of the NGO sector, they would also be targeting PUD people in the communities. So all of those aspects, they are key from a point of credibility and trust as a source of information. For example, in some cases, if you find a message which says that this has been endorsed by the National Department of Health, or the moment you see the National Department of Health logo on it, you begin to say this is a credible source of information. Be it stats that is being spoken about in that particular message, it becomes a credible source. When you see the civil society, the SANAC Civil Society forum logo on it, this is a credible source of information. For those that are in hospitals, or for those that are in community-based organizations, your brand is known out there. Associate your message with your brand so that people will begin to follow not just your brand, but the messaging associated with that. And in some cases, some of those people, it could be the TB champions, they are credible sources of these kinds of TB messaging because they've got lived experiences in the communities. So you'll find that it is key that we look at the vehicle through which the message gets to be disseminated. Of course, myself, being a public health specialist, I'm bound to talk about what I'm talking about now because I'm a credible source of information when it comes to social behavior change communication, when it comes to building capacity of community organizations and civil society sectors. So that is a sixth component that is key when it comes to social behavior change communication and how we craft our message. And then we've got the seventh component. So the seventh component actually looks at aspects to do with culture and contextual relevance. When you talk about culture and contextual relevance, the message should be culturally appropriate and fit the audience daily realities. So there is an aspect to do with when you come up with a message, you don't have to parachute a message from the internet and just bring it into the community and expect to drive change. Like I said, when it comes to social behavior change communication, we cannot just have 2 or 10 messages that we're pushing into the community. We need to be having tailored messages. And there are some costs associated with that. And then we need to look at it from a contextual perspective. For example, you're in the Northern Cape. Take note of cultural and contextual issues. Take note of language barriers that could be there. You're in the Eastern Cape. It's a different setting, different scenario. You're in Limpopo. Look at all of those kinds of aspects to say what could be the best way of disseminating this health message. What are some of the cultural aspects that could come to play in this particular context? Particularly the use of local languages. So it is very key and critical that as community-based organizations, we make use of local languages. As civil society sectors, we craft our message using local languages so that we can drive localized change. And also using local language, it makes it much more relatable and relevant to the communities that we are serving. So that is why it is very key and critical that messaging might come, let's say, from national, it will be in English, but we translate it to local languages so that we can use it in our locality. I know there is IEC material that could already be coming in English, but there is a need for us to begin to translate that IEC material to local languages. As I'm speaking right now, one of the major weaknesses is that you would notice that in most cases we talk about all these other languages and then forget about sign language. And yet there are a lot of people that would want to get this messaging. And through sign language, you could potentially reach out to them. In some cases, you will find ourselves having this language in English, and we are in a community where they speak Zulu or Sotho or Tswana. So it is key and critical that as civil society, as community-based organizations, as academics, as university students, we begin to transform our messaging. We begin to translate our messaging, keeping in mind where we're coming from, keeping in mind the needs of the communities, keeping in mind that there is a need for us to disseminate information in a contextual, relevant, and culturally acceptable manner. So that is very key when it comes to information dissemination, because you might be having great messaging, you could be having great information, but if you don't translate it, people won't understand it. So right now we're doing this in English. We could potentially get it translated directly to other local languages so that community-based organizations in the catchment area of specific communities, specific mines for the TB program, or in places where they're doing conservation, climate change, whatever messaging that you're coming up with, it becomes relevant to them. And then the other part is around framing and tone. Hey, I think that is component number 8, if I've not missed the count. Component number 8 is around framing and tone. So there's an aspect to do with positive framing, encouraging action rather than fear-based approaches. Earlier on, I spoke about a little bit of fear. At times fear does work, but not all the time. That is why when it comes to messaging, we need to have diverse messaging, because we're targeting different groupings of people. So we need to have a positive framing so as to encourage action, because at times fear might translate to paralysis, where people get the fear and then they end up not acting on anything. Like, hey, I would rather just die. In any case, I'm gonna die. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So it is important that we frame our messaging around, a positive frame, around something that is positive, a positive outcome. For example, instead of saying TB kills, use TB is curable. Let's start treatment early. Hey, you're busy saying TB kills. No. TB is curable. Let's start treatment early. So you are telling people that this thing is manageable. All you need to do is to start treatment early. So it's a positive message that we are using. And you get that translated to other local languages so that people will get to know about this. You get this translated to other, to sign language and all the other languages that are out there to ensure that the message hits home. So fear-based messaging may cause avoidance, while positive messaging, actually empowers the communities. It gives them that aspect of them looking forward to a brighter tomorrow, because they are seeing TB as something that is manageable. They are seeing deforestation as something that can be managed. They are seeing all these other health problems as something that is manageable. And that is key for the communities that we serve. And then, of course, the ninth component is the medium of delivery. So we need to look at the different channels of communication to say what could be the best way through which this message gets to be delivered. Determines how the message will be delivered, considers the target audience when we're looking at the media of consumption and their habits. So we look at those aspects to say that what could be the best way of sharing these kinds of messaging. In our case, we try and share this messaging through social media, through YouTube. We also send it via WhatsApp, because we're trying to drive a lot of civil society organizations to be out there and drive change. So we want to educate them, want to share information, want to bridge the intention-action gap, because their intention is to drive change in the communities, but they don't have that thing that enables them to craft the messaging. So we are saying we're going to assist you to craft the messaging so that you can act appropriately. So we look at the different channels through which we can reach out to these community-based organizations. And this could be through face-to-face sessions. It could be through webinars that we host. It could be us going live. So all of those are strategies that we are reaching out to civil society organizations, to sector leaders. You will find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, repeating the same message to make to the point that we reach out to different people that are in the communities, because we want to drive change in the communities. So those are some of the aspects that we need to look at. We're targeting people in rural areas. What could be the best channel of communication? Could it be community events? Could it be through the chiefs? Could it be at the gatherings with the indunas? Could it be radio station, local radio station? Could it be billboards or flyers? Could it be word of mouth? Could it be burial societies? We're targeting young people. Should it be on TikTok or WhatsApp? Should it be on Instagram? What could be the best way of reaching out to them? Should we be putting stickers and posters in clinics? Can it work at the taxi ranks? Can we maybe put these stickers inside the taxi? So those are some of the thinkings that we need to have. Should we be using maybe local influencers? Some of the local people that are common in this community, so that they share messaging in the community WhatsApp groups, in the community Facebook groups. So we need to think about those aspects to say what could be the best communication channel for the messaging that we want to send out to the communities. When we have done all of this, the 10th component, the bonus component, is about having message reinforcement. Repeated exposure to the same messaging, where you get this message, it hits you again. For those that are always on TV, you see that they are adverts. They advertise, they will re-advertise, they will advertise and advertise again. In some cases, you will find that it is actually coming from private companies. They're very good at it. You will see their logos. Some of them, they do donations of tables and then they put their logos on those particular tables. And that is the same thing that we need to do with our messaging. If we want to drive a lot of people to start drinking water, maybe we should be branding our tables with water pictures, with glasses of water. If we want a lot of people to be eating fruits, maybe we should be donating tables and chairs to the schools and giving them nicely painted tables and chairs which have got fruits, pictures of fruits and vegetables, so as to sensitize them about the eating of fruits and drinking of water. And those are key messaging, simplified messaging that could increase the appeal of young people when it comes to consumption of apples and bananas and all different kinds of fruits. And in some cases, it's more about seeing this message over and over and over again. That is why you find that in some of these health WhatsApp groups that we run, I know the law and human rights sector, they have set up WhatsApp groups particularly targeted at men, so that they can repeatedly expose them not only to health messaging, but social messaging, exercise messaging, so that in those particular groupings, they are, socially healthy, and also financially healthy, so that they can begin to influence how those men think and how those men view life. But also, it serves as a support structure, because over time, in as much as it's being used for repeated messaging, for retargeting of that particular messaging, it actually drives change. It changes the mindset of the men, but also it builds in a support structure. So message reinforcement is very key. You must have repetition and reminders of the message. When a person turns in this direction, they see the same message in a different format. They turn in this direction, they see the same message in a different format. They begin to see pictures of bananas, fruits, and vegetables everywhere where they turn. It increases the probability of them ending up eating those fruits and vegetables. They open their phone, they receive a message about drinking of water. So that way it keeps them knowing that, hey, you know what, I need to drink water. So there is a need for us in the health space to begin to talk about TB, to begin to talk about climate change, to begin to talk about maybe access to justice. All of those kinds of messaging are very key, and people need to be receiving repeated messaging. Have you gone for a TB checkup yet? Clinics are open. Visit SLN Clinic today. So it has got a messaging that actually has got a call to action, and it is direct, short and sweet. So all of those aspects, they are key when it comes to how we craft our messages. And you know what? Like I said, we are here to provide you support. We'll always be there for you. Please, if you've got any comments or any need for support in the space of crafting social behavior change communication message, reach out to us. Be it you are at a stage where you would want to go out to the communities, undertake some research, basic research initiatives where you engage with some of these community stakeholders, with some of these recipients of services. You would want to engage with them. You would want to get to discuss some of the challenges that they are facing so that you can begin to mold messages. You can begin to co-create messages that are going to drive change in the communities jointly with them. Please reach out, comment in the section below, drop us a message. Like I said, we are there to provide you support. See you next time. Thank you.